how to reach $1 million without a high income. You're scrolling through your phone at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, probably should be sleeping, and you come across one of those articles. You know the ones about some 28-year-old who just hit their first $1 million. And there's always this moment, right? This weird little pause where you're simultaneously impressed and honestly a little annoyed. Because they always have this backstory that sounds like, I just saved aggressively from my $180,000 software engineering job and invested in index funds. And you're sitting there thinking, okay, cool, but what if I don't make $180,000? What if I'm making $50,000 or $65,000 or even $45,000? Does that mean the whole millionaire by 40 thing is just not for me? My name is Ryan, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why some people seem to effortlessly build wealth while others stay stuck in the same financial patterns for decades. And here's what I've learned after years of studying this stuff, talking to people who've actually done it, and watching the patterns emerge. Reaching $1 million has surprisingly little to do with how much you earn. I know that sounds like something a motivational poster would say, but hear me out, because the math on this is actually wild when you break it down properly. Most people think wealth is a formula that looks like this: high income plus time equals millionaire status. But that's not quite right. The real formula is more like any income minus your lifestyle times consistency times something most people completely overlook, which we'll get to, equals actual wealth accumulation. And that gap, that little space between what you earn and what you spend, that's where everything happens. That's where the magic lives. So if you've ever felt like building real wealth is this exclusive club that only high earners get access to, I want to completely reframe that for you. Because by the end of this, you're going to understand not just that it's possible to reach $1 million on a modest income, but exactly how the people who've done it actually pulled it off. And more importantly, why most high earners never get there at all. The income trap everyone falls into. Let's start with something that's going to sound counterintuitive. Making more money is one of the worst things that can happen to your wealth building journey if you're not careful. I know, that sounds absolutely ridiculous, but here's what actually happens in real life. Someone's making $50,000 a year. They're living in a decent apartment, driving a reliable used car, eating out maybe once or twice a week. Their expenses are, let's say, $40,000 a year. They're saving $10,000 annually, which is 20% of their income. Pretty good, right? Then they get a promotion. Suddenly, they're making $75,000. And here's where it gets interesting. And by interesting, I mean financially devastating for a lot of people, because instead of keeping their lifestyle roughly the same and banking that extra $25,000, they upgrade everything. A nicer apartment, obviously, lease on a new car because I can afford it now, eating out 4 times a week instead of 2, subscriptions they didn't have before, better vacations, and suddenly their expenses are $65,000 a year. They're still saving $10,000 annually. You see what happened there? Their income went up by 50%, but their wealth accumulation stayed exactly the same. Actually, it probably got worse, because now they've locked themselves into a more expensive lifestyle that's harder to downgrade from. It's called lifestyle inflation, and it's basically the silent killer of wealth building. I had a friend, let's call him Marcus, who went from making $45,000 at his first job to making $120,000 5 years later. Incredible jump, right? But when we grabbed coffee one time and he started talking about money stress, I was confused. How are you stressed about money when you're making $120,000? And he just kind of laughed and said, man, I don't even know where it goes. Turns out his rent went from $900 to $2,400. His car payment went from 0, paid off Honda, to $650, leased BMW. His entire lifestyle had expanded to perfectly consume his new income, plus a little extra on credit cards. The people who actually reach $1 million without high incomes understand something fundamental. Wealth isn't built by what you earn, it's built by the gap between what you earn and what you spend. And more importantly, they keep that gap wide even when their income increases. That's the entire game. Think about it mathematically for a second. If you make $50,000 and save $10,000 a year, you're saving 20%. If you make $200,000 and save $20,000 a year, you're saving 10%. Who's building wealth faster, relatively speaking? The person making less. Because wealth building is a percentage game, not a dollar game. The actual path, time and consistency beat everything. Okay, so here's where we get into the actual mechanics of how someone making, let's say, $55,000 a year can realistically reach $1 million. And I'm going to give you the real numbers, no sugarcoating. Let's say you're 25 years old, you make $55,000 a year, you manage to save 15% of your gross income, that's $8,250 a year, or about $688 a month. You invest this money in a simple, boring index fund that tracks the S&P 500, which historically returns about 10% annually on average. Some years more, some years less, but we're talking long-term average here. If you do this consistently without touching it until you're 60 years old, that's 35 years, you'll have approximately $2.6 million. Not $1 million, $2.6 million. Now I know what you're thinking. Ryan, that's 35 years. I don't want to wait until I'm 60. Fair, let's say you want to hit $1 million by 50 instead. Same scenario, 25 years of investing $688 per month at 10% average returns gives you about $900,000. Close enough to $1 million, and you're only 50. But here's where it gets really interesting, because this is where most people completely miss the point. Let's say your income increases over time, which it probably will, even modestly. You get raises, maybe switch jobs, pick up a side project here and there, and let's say instead of keeping your savings at $688 a month, you bump it up gradually. Start at $688, but by year 10, you're saving $900 a month. By year 20, you're saving $1,200 a month. Not crazy increases, just normal career progression while keeping lifestyle inflation in check. Now you're hitting $1 million by your mid-40s, maybe earlier, and you never made six figures. You just stayed consistent, kept your lifestyle reasonable, and let compound interest do its thing. This is the part that sounds boring, I know. There's no hack here, no secret investment strategy, no real estate empire built from nothing. It's just math and time. But that's exactly why it works, because boring is reliable. Boring is what actually builds wealth. The psychological game nobody talks about. Here's something they don't teach you in personal finance class. The hardest part about building wealth isn't the math, it's the psychology. It's not knowing what to do, it's actually doing it, month after month, year after year, while everyone else around you is living differently. Your coworker buys a new car, your college friend posts Instagram stories from Bali, your neighbor renovates their kitchen, and you're just investing $700 a month into an account you barely look at. It feels invisible. It feels like nothing's happening. Because in the short term, nothing is happening. You're not seeing dramatic changes to your net worth month to month, especially in the early years. This is where most people quit. Not because they can't afford to save, they can, but because it feels pointless. It feels like deprivation without reward, like you're missing out on life right now for some abstract future benefit that doesn't feel real. I remember talking to this woman named Sarah who reached $1 million in her late 40s on a teacher's salary, never made more than $60,000 in a single year. And I asked her, how did you stay motivated when it felt like everyone else was living it up and you were just saving? And she said something that stuck with me. I stopped comparing my finances to other people's lifestyles. I started comparing my finances to my own goals. That shift, that mental shift is everything. Because once you stop measuring your success by what you can buy right now and start measuring it by whether you're on track to hit your long-term targets, the whole game changes. You stop feeling deprived and start feeling in control, powerful even. But let me be honest with you, there are going to be moments where this sucks, where you really want something and you have to say no because you're committed to saving. That's real. I'm not going to pretend it's easy. But here's what I've noticed about people who actually make it. They find ways to enjoy life within their means. They don't deprive themselves completely, they just get intentional about where their money goes. The side hustle question, and why it's not what you think. Everyone talks about side hustles like they're the magic answer to building wealth on a modest income. Just make an extra $1,000 a month. And sure, yeah, if you can add an extra $12,000 to your annual savings, that obviously accelerates things. But here's what people get wrong about side hustles. Most people start a side hustle and immediately use that extra income to upgrade their lifestyle. They're making an extra $800 a month from freelancing or driving for Uber or selling stuff online, and suddenly their lifestyle expands by $800. New subscriptions, nicer groceries, more eating out. The side income becomes supplemental lifestyle funding, not wealth building. I talked to this guy named Cameron, who drove for Uber on Friday and Saturday nights for 3 years, made about $1,000 a month doing it,
hated every minute of it, honestly. But he had this rule. That money doesn't exist for lifestyle purposes. It goes straight to his investment account. Over 3 years, that was $36,000, which with compound interest became a significant chunk of his eventual net worth. But here's the thing, and this is important. You don't need a side hustle to reach $1 million. It helps, sure, it accelerates the timeline, but it's not required. Plenty of people hit 7 figures just from their main income, plus disciplined saving, plus time. The side hustle is an accelerant, not a requirement. But what is required, though, is living below your means on your main income. That's non-negotiable. If your lifestyle consumes 100% of your primary income, you're not building wealth, period. Doesn't matter how many side hustles you have, the money will just evaporate into lifestyle inflation. The investment part that scares everyone. Let's talk about investing, because this is where a lot of people freeze up. They've got money to save, they want to build wealth, but they're terrified of losing it all in the market or making
Some catastrophic mistake. Here's the truth. For most people trying to reach $1 million on a modest income, investing should be almost boringly simple. You're not trying to beat the market, you're not trying to pick the next Amazon, you're just trying to capture the market's average returns over a long period of time. For most people, that means low-cost index funds, specifically something that tracks the total stock market or the S&P 500. You set up automatic investments every month, and you basically never touch it until retirement. That's it. That's the whole strategy. I know that sounds too simple. People want there to be more to it. They want some secret sauce, some special knowledge that unlocks better returns. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The vast majority of professional investors, people whose literal job it is to beat the market, don't beat the market. Over long periods, something like 90% of actively managed funds underperform simple index funds. So why would you, with a full-time job and a life outside of finance, think you're going to outsmart the market? You're not, and you don't need to. Because if you just capture average market returns, which historically have been around 10% annually for stocks, that's more than enough to reach $1 million over time. The only real mistake you can make is stopping, pulling your money out when the market crashes, panicking during a recession. That's what kills returns. Because here's the thing about market crashes. They're temporary. Always have been. The market crashes, people panic, and then it recovers. And if you stayed invested the whole time, you didn't lose anything. It was just numbers on a screen going down and then back up. But if you panic and sell when everything's down, now you've locked in those losses. You've turned a temporary paper loss into a permanent real loss, and you've probably missed the recovery, which often happens fast. The people who reach $1 million on modest incomes understand this deeply. They invest during market highs, they invest during market crashes, they invest when everything feels uncertain. They just keep going because they know that trying to time the market is a fool's game, and consistency beats cleverness every single time. The car trap. I need to talk about cars for a minute, because honestly, cars might be the single biggest wealth killer for middle-income Americans. And I say this as someone who likes cars, who understands the appeal of a nice vehicle, but the math is just devastating. The average new car payment in America right now is over $700 a month. Let's say you have a car payment of $700 for 30 years of your adult life. Maybe not the same car, you trade up every few years, always have a payment, you know how it goes. That's $252,000 in car payments over those 30 years. But wait, it gets worse. Because if instead of spending $700 a month on car payments, you invested that $700 a month and earned average market returns, after 30 years, you'd have roughly $1.7 million. $1.7 million from car payments. Now, I'm not saying don't have a car, you probably need a car. But the difference between buying a reliable used car for $8,000 to $12,000 and driving it for 8 to 10 years versus always having a car payment on a new or nearly new vehicle is literally the difference between retiring a millionaire and retiring broke. And here's the thing, I get it. Cars are visible, they signal status, they're fun to drive. I understand the appeal. But you have to ask yourself, would you rather have a nice car right now or financial independence in the future? Because for most people on modest incomes, you can't have both. The math doesn't work. Some of the wealthiest people I know drive 10-year-old Hondas. They could afford any car they want.
They just choose not to because they understand that every dollar spent on car payments is a dollar that's not building wealth, and they'd rather be wealthy than look wealthy. That's a crucial distinction, by the way, being wealthy versus looking wealthy. Most people who look wealthy, nice car, nice house, nice clothes, aren't actually wealthy. They're just high income and high spending. The people who are actually wealthy often look pretty ordinary because they've been funneling money into investments instead of lifestyle for years. Housing, the other major wealth decision. After cars, housing is the other big one. And this is complicated because unlike a car, which is purely a depreciating asset, a house can be an investment, but it's not automatically one. The conventional wisdom is rent is throwing money away, buy a house, and there's some truth to that. Building equity is real, but it's not the whole story. Here's what people miss. The question isn't should I rent or buy? The question is at what price does buying make sense and can I avoid lifestyle inflation in the process? Because buying a house isn't just the mortgage payment. It's property taxes, insurance, maintenance, HOA fees if applicable, and all the little costs that add up. And for a lot of people, buying a house becomes an excuse to upgrade their lifestyle dramatically. They go from renting a $1,200 apartment to buying a house with a $2,500 monthly payment, including all those extra costs, and suddenly they've added $1,300 to their monthly burn rate. That extra $1,300 a month invested over 30 years is another $1 million in wealth they gave up to have a nicer house. Now, I'm not saying don't have a house. You probably need a house. But the difference between buying a reliable used car for $8,000 to $12,000 and driving it for 8 to 10 years versus always having a car payment on a new or nearly new vehicle is literally the difference between retiring a millionaire and retiring broke. And here's the thing, I get it. Buying a house is often needed to get into a certain school district for your kids or move to a place you feel safer. I'm not saying you should live in a cramped apartment in a dangerous neighborhood just to save money, but even within the realm of reasonable decision-making, there are massive differences in how much housing people buy. The mindset shift that changes everything. Okay, we're getting near the end here, and I want to talk about the mental shift that separates people who build wealth from people who don't. Because I've seen people with identical incomes end up in completely different financial situations, and it almost always comes down to this one thing. It's the ability to delay gratification and find fulfillment in progress rather than possession. Most people need to see and feel their wealth to believe it's real. They need the nice car, the nice house, the nice stuff, because that's tangible. You can touch it, show it, experience it every day. But the people who build wealth on modest incomes find a way to get that same dopamine hit from watching their net worth grow. They check their investment accounts and see the balance increasing, and that gives them the same satisfaction that other people get from buying something new. It's a complete reframe of what success feels like. Success isn't buying something. Success is watching your net worth cross another $100,000 threshold. Success isn't impressing other people with your lifestyle. Success is knowing you're on track to never have to worry about money again.
And once you make that mental shift, everything gets easier. You stop feeling like you're depriving yourself, and you start feeling like you're winning a game that most people don't even know they're playing. The actual timeline. Let's get real. So let's bring this all together with some realistic numbers. You're making $55,000 a year right now. Let's map out what this actually looks like. You decide to save 15% of your gross income. That's $688 a month going into investments. You stick with this, and your income grows modestly over the years, maybe 3% annual raises, plus a couple of job changes that bump you up a bit. By year 10, you're making $70,000 and saving about $900 a month. By year 20, you're making $85,000 and saving $1,200 a month. With average market returns of 10%, here's roughly what your wealth looks like. After 10 years, about $140,000. After 20 years, about $550,000. After 30 years, about $1.6 million. You hit the $1 million mark somewhere around year 25, 27. You're in your early 50s if you started at 25. You never made a six-figure salary, you just stayed consistent, kept your lifestyle in check, and let time do its thing. Is it slow? Yeah. Is it boring? Absolutely. Does it work? Every single time, without fail, if you stick with it. The final truth. Here's what I want you to understand. Reaching $1 million without a high income isn't about some secret strategy or hidden knowledge. It's about understanding a few simple principles and having the discipline to follow them for a really long time. It's about keeping the gap wide between what you earn and what you spend. It's about avoiding the big wealth killers, car payments, lifestyle inflation, trying to impress people who don't care about you. It's about investing consistently in boring index funds and never stopping, even when it feels pointless, even when the market crashes, even when everyone around you seems to be living better. Most people never build wealth because they're not willing to be uncomfortable now for freedom later. They need the gratification now. They need to see and feel their money working in the form of stuff and experiences and status symbols. But you can be different. You can make the choice that your 45-year-old self or your 55-year-old self will be desperately grateful for. You can decide that financial independence matters more than looking successful to people you don't even like. And the beautiful thing is, once you really internalize this, once you make that mental shift, it stops feeling like sacrifice. It starts feeling like power. Because every dollar you save and invest is a little piece of future freedom. Every month you stay consistent is another month closer to never having to worry about money again. You don't need to make $200,000 a year to build real wealth. You just need to live like you make less than you do, invest the difference, and give it time. That's the whole secret. It's not sexy, it's not fast, it's not going to make a good Instagram story. But it works. It's always worked, and it'll work for you too, if you let it.